We have the technology to innovate. It's time to do that. People are building stuff based on 80-year-old TDPs in some cases. We're trying to push the defense sector into looking at new munitions versus just, again, going out and building the same thing we've been building for a long time. If your technology is that good, it will survive two things. It will survive iteration and it will survive modulation. If it can't do that, then you don't have a good technology anymore, because that's how fast it's changing on the battlefield.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of DIB Innovators. My guest today is Jon Williams, CEO of War Inc., a veteran-owned defense tech company out of Tacoma, Washington, building counter-UAS system, fusing, and payload performance under its Project O&I initiative. Jon's a combat Marine veteran who's run everything from defense procurement to Microsoft Xbox business before founding War. This should be exciting. Jon, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys reaching out.
Yeah, super cool. So cool background. You're a veteran. Thanks for serving. Rifleman, obviously, because you're a Marine. All Marines are riflemen, I believe. But why don't you tell me a little bit about, Marine, and then how you got into kind of defense procurement, Stonehold, Microsoft, just that journey, I think is fascinating for easy.
Yeah, it was a long one, so I will make it as brief as possible. So I joined the Marine Corps out of high school, was a 03 door kicker, 03 everything. So my first pump was to Fallujah, and then we went on a MEU for my second deployment. And during my second deployment, I re-enlisted back into the Marine Corps to go to Afghanistan. So I went to Sangin after that, and then came back from that. Went through a bunch of trials and tribulations, ended up getting medically retired, and then started a company with a buddy of mine that was in the ammo space called Stonehold. That went pretty well for a few years, and then we hit a roadblock, and so we ended up shutting down that company. That's what led me to getting into working with some years down there with Microsoft, the Microsoft suite of teams, whether that was Bing, 343 Studios, Xbox, Microsoft stores, and then ended up from that actually CEOing a professional race team for almost 2 years before COVID hit. And then from there, after COVID, it was a young team, so we didn't really survive COVID. And so I kind of reconfigured and got back into the defense space and started War Inc. And so over the last 3+ years, it's been a lot of just build, and now we're starting to get to that point where we're making that big turn and have a lot of cool products to show people. And so now it's just a matter of getting that to manufacturing, and a large part of that is changing a big function of how we look at the defense industrial base. So
Okay. And from the Marines, not just always a journey. It is for a lot of folks, transitioning. But man, you got into race car. Is there a thread or a leadership lesson that you kind of learned across the way, or that you've held on to, that's helped all those transitions?
yeah, I lucked out being when in my time in the Marine Corps. I was there like when I was a boot, right? Like all of my seniors were like the invasion dudes, right? And so like I think that they had a really unique perspectives on leadership, on things that that's kind of made an exodus out of the Marine Corps, at least from what I've been watching and keeping up with. And so, but I think that one of the biggest lessons that I learned is that first of all, that this life is a gift. Like every moment that we have to do something, we should be putting our pedal to the floor, and you have this moment to kind of do stuff with, so you should do that. A lot of people made a lot of sacrifices for us to have the abilities and freedoms that we have in this country, and so that's kind of first and foremost. And then number two is that everyone reacts to something differently, right? Whether that's in combat, whether that's here stateside, like everyone has a different viewpoint. Everyone has a different reaction to just stressful environments, and you have to be not just leadership is a very, very broad thing. You have to be really well rounded to find those good leaders and bring other people in closer to you. So leadership is largely emotional, and if you can't manage other people's emotions and expectations, then you're gonna have a hard time no matter what you do. And so that's one, I think, key takeaway that I've taken with me forward with every venture that I've had, is like, how do I manage emotions and manage expectations of the people that I'm working with?
Yeah, manage your expectations or theirs.
Both, a little bit of both, right? Because in the military, you're just like, go, go, go. You will get it done. You will meet this deadline. And Marines, it's adapt and overcome. You will figure it out. You know what I mean? And so, and you don't have as much in the civilian sector. You don't. It's a bit different. There's not ways to motivate and incentivize people is a bit different. So,
Tell me about working at Microsoft. What was that like? How was that transition?
That was interesting, because being in the defense space, you're still dealing with largely, a lot of veterans in the defense space, and so you can still kind of get away with using the lingo that you learned while you were in, getting out, right? So there was a lot of carryover where getting into the Microsoft space, I really had to learn more how to be a civilian, more how to be a little less rigid, and have some more fluid expectations. Now, with that said, it is Microsoft, it is Xbox, it was 343 Studios. I mean, those teams are massive, and do have quite a decent amount of structure in them. So I fit in a little bit in that space. And I was working on the gaming space, and I was working on the FPS side of the house. So we were working with like the Halo teams and things like that. So there was some carryover, I guess. Some of the lingo made sense to people because we were talking about how to organize teams and things of that nature. So, but it was a lot of fun. It was an industry I never really thought find myself in, but it was a cool stepping stone, and led to a lot of cool relationships. So
How about your time in the Marines, in like a high-tech company moving fast? Like, is the speed different? Is it same? Is it more intense? I mean, obviously, life and death is one thing. I'm not talking about that, but or actual being in contact, but just I've never experienced or seen, the top 5, the big Facebooks, the Googles, the Microsofts.
yeah, it's a totally different pace, honestly. Like when you go from being, a grunt in the Marine Corps to working in really probably any other space, the amount of time that you spend doing a whole lot of nothing is pretty large, and then there's also a lot of hand-holding. I know that a lot of guys that I've, remained in contact with over the years who've stayed in the Marine Corps or other services and gotten out of service, especially the guys that stayed in longer, I feel have a harder time transitioning out because you've just been doing it for that much longer, and you're just kinda handheld. You know what I mean? Like, you have someone telling you what to do, where to be, how to act for a long time, and you get out and you're like, "Well, I have to do this. I've gotta figure out what to do." Like, you're like, I have to have some, autonomy over myself and my decisions, like, that's crazy, So, that's a difficult thing for a lot of guys and girls to do, is figuring out how to move about out at their own pace, especially, I mean, for myself, I mean, led a slightly different path because even though I was working with some of these larger teams, it was still a very entrepreneurial path, and so I was still wholly responsible for each one of those things that was going on. And so I was working inside of those Microsoft teams, and working inside of racing, but I was the CEO, or I was, had some ownership over those categorical things that we were working on for Microsoft. So
Oh, perfect. So talking about war, what was the impetus for finding your next big thing? What was your philosophy thesis?
yeah, so when I first started War Inc., towards the end of my career, I was a marksmanship instructor. So I worked with boots at boot camp, and then I ran Delta Range as the police sergeant there. And I had gotten a chance to go through the Urban Assault Leaders course, which was like back in the day, like they would hand choose guys to go through this course to come back and teach, CQB to the other grunts. And so I liked coaching. I liked teaching. I coached baseball for a number of years. And so when I first started War Inc., we were a training company and an apparel company, and so we were starting to move into tactical gear and some other things. And I had one of my mentors that I had when I started my ammo company 10 plus years ago had called me down to Soft Week a couple of years ago and was like, "Hey, this is actually a retirement dinner, so forth and so on. But I'm actually going to be leaving you my company." And so that led to a young company like ours owning the technical data packs for large scale munitions. So everything from 40 millimeter up to 1,000-pound bombs, fusing, and other things. And so the journey for War Inc. has kind of been a little bit backwards from like where most people start. Like, most people don't start with owning the technical data packs at this level, out the gate. And so my mission has been, how do I build things behind these technical data packs that can bring in other sources of revenue so that we can build out a large enough base to then go after the manufacturing of the stuff on our own. Because that was kind of the vision that my mentor had when he was building. And so he just saw me as the torch carrier for that project. And so that's been my mission, is to move the defense industrial base into this new kind of concept and mindset and develop new TDPs instead of us using and building stuff that's been built for 80 years, right? We have the technology to innovate. It's time to do that. So
The technical data pack. Share with me what that is specifically.
Yeah, so technical data packs are basically the design work for like that you would hand over to a manufacturer to produce said munitions. So whether that's like the 70 millimeter warhead you see back here, or 40 millimeter, or the Mark 80 series 250 pound bombs. So we carry TDPs through a bunch of different categories, and then each one of those categories, from 40 millimeter to 70 millimeter to 155 artillery, we have multiple TDPs inside of each one of those that are basically like the next evolution of technology inside of those categories. And so whether that's a new way of developing it, a new way of manufacturing it, other new technologies bringing to the table. So, being able to deploy EW effects from around, which is a new capability that we're working on. So we're trying to push the defense sector into looking at new munitions versus just, again, going out and building the same thing we've been building for a long time.
And you're creating like the plan and how to machine it, how to make it. Like that is really your core IP, or is it different than that? I'm trying to get my arms around this.
Our main core IP is around the actual warhead itself, and then
Okay.
the interior of the warhead. So like if you could go to any manufacturer, well, you could go to a handful of manufacturers and say, "Hey, I would like you to make this," and they could take that TDP and they could put it into the system, the CAD and everything else, and they could actually build it using your stuff. So most manufacturers around the world that are producing munitions don't even own the TDP, right? It's owned by somebody else, and then they're building. Now there's a couple of, the larger primes that are vertically integrated where they own the entire stack and the technical know-how and the manufacturing know-how, like Rheinmetall, BAE. But a lot of the times, the smaller ones, like they have the technical data pack, and then they're going to manufacturer that's separate as a partner, and they're having them build it. And so what we're trying to do is not only own the technical data pack, but now we're building out new, more agile manufacturing processes that allow us to go to a specific line and go, okay, well, this one line can produce everything from 40 millimeter up to a 1,000 pound bomb and everything in between. That just hasn't really been done in the past, mostly because the previous technologies didn't allow for it to really happen at the speed or scale that was necessary to compete at this level. But technology is starting to shift and change, and so now we're showcasing, hey, we can actually compete at a similar level and be far more agile. So now we can, put together not just the shell in-house, but we can do the fusing on site, we can do the energetics on site, we can do the lap and pour on site, we can do the entire process on site. And so for the first time in decades, our plan is to showcase, raw materials coming in one end and a complete round coming out the other. Instead of saying we've got a shell manufacturer over here and a fusing manufacturer over there and, energetics over here, and then having to work on the logistics of getting all those things put together.
All right. So you are basically you're just vertically creating this munition within your own location. So you're not taking it to manufacturer. You're creating the manufacturing and doing that in house.
That's our goal, yeah.
And how many is it? Like, are these data packs proprietary? Like, are they just yours, or are there many for a 40 millimeter? How many exist for that? Is it just yours?
For standard, like, TP rounds or training practice rounds or HEDP, like, we have those TDPs and other people also own those TDPs, but there's not enough people producing them, so we're trying to fill that gap on the basic level. But then what we're trying to include in that is showing the State Department and the DOW, "Hey, look, we have the TDPs that are here, the basic stuff that you're used to, but we can enhance upon these and make the warfighter even more accurate or more lethal and, increase their actual capability by, increasing the capabilities of the TDP."
Yeah. And how are you doing that research? Just out of curiosity, how are you figuring out like this is a new way we could create this round, or a new effect we could create doing these things? Like, how does
I think we're, and I think I'm blessed to be one of the few, we're not a prime. Maybe one day we'll be able to compete with some of the larger primes, but, I actually operated at the gap. You know what I mean? Like, operated and was able to feel the gap and like where things have led. And I've been able to spend a little bit of time in Ukraine and other places, and I've witnessed the gap, I've felt the gap, I've seen the gap, and so now it's time to fill the gap. So I think part of where the research comes from is actually getting, AARs and stuff back from the actual current flots around the world and saying, "Okay, what do you guys need? Okay, let's start developing TDPs that allow us to fill that need." And so that's where the research comes from. Is it's We don't have to do the research though. The troops on the front are saying, "Hey, we need this." And so, and also you can also do a little bit of just kind of not, you know, forecasting of like, okay, well, if we're producing all these new electronic packages on all this EW, whether it's jamming or RF detection, whatever the case is, then the new battlefield must have something that can defeat that part of the kill chain, right? So that's what we're working on.
What are some big gaps you've seen, if you can talk about?
Thermal's huge, right? New spectrum stuff is massive, right? So how do we stay at the forefront of that? How do we, not just compete, but outpace our adversaries at that level? How do we start to tear down the barriers that this new flot is kind of showcasing, right? You have like the gray area, the gray zone. You have like the central flot, and then on either side of that, you've got 30 plus kilometers of just of dead space that's completely jammed, or it's being hit by GNSS jamming or all sorts of other things. And then obviously we've seen some answers to that when it comes to fiber optic drones and other things of that nature, or just getting up high enough. And so yeah, it's just the technology is moving at such a fast pace now. Like I tell all the defense tech companies that I work with, if your technology is that good, it will survive two things. It will survive iteration and it will survive modulation. If it can't do that, then you don't have a good technology anymore, because that's how fast it's changing on the fly. Now, with that said, like right now in Ukraine, like those guys on the fly can make a request change to the TDP on the SOP side or the TDP side, on the software or the hardware side, and in 2 weeks they have a deployed solution. So 2 weeks is the turnaround time. Now, it's iterating so fast that in 6 weeks from now, they might go back to a previous thing they were doing, because now it's iterated so far that something else might work that they used to do. And so it's just finding this, but everything's modulating on top of it. So if your technology is good, it will do those two things. If it doesn't, then like I said, you might get it through the door, but it's not going to last very long. And I'm glad that the defense industrial base, I'm glad the US has woken up and realized, hey, we have a problem. We got to start filling some gaps, and we got to start producing our stuff on our own. But another thing I tell them is like, look, again, if your technology is good, like maybe you get to TLR9 with through SOCOM, maybe, you know, but realistically, like your stuff is going to be used first and foremost in some Baltic state, Ukraine, Poland, Indo-PACOM somewhere, maybe Southcom, like that's the reality. Like the actual US warfighter probably won't use your tech until you're on version 2, 3, 4, you know, as far as a big army, big Air Force, big Marine Corps goes.
So you walked in with these data packs, like you said, building the company backwards. Are you using them in Ukraine? Like you selling them to those folks or partnering with them? How does that work?
So I'm not gonna name names. I've been headed by a lot of different companies to gain access to the TDPs that we have, because we have newer TDPs. People are building stuff based on 80-year-old TDPs in some cases. And so I've shied away from that at this point, because when I first started out, a couple years ago, and I was talking to some of these companies, they like wouldn't give me the time of day, and so I was just kind of ignored. And I was like, hey, I've got these TDPs. If anyone wants to work with me, and no one really would give me like a chance to talk, really. So I decided to kind of go out and do it on my own. And so now I have a manufacturer that I'm working with, and we're trying to we're doing some raising of some capital to build our own manufacturing site, because now we showcase that we can do this in a new way. And so I've been asked to sell the TDPs. I'm just, I've moved beyond that point. And so now the focus is just getting to these things to manufactured. And even if we stood up an old way, even if we took the TDP and used it at its baseline, if you're standing up a new line, you have to get validation, you have to get verified, you have to go through all this proper steps of getting all the safety requirements done anyways. So I figure, why go down the old path when we're gonna have to go down the same validation points anyways, and just do the new thing, you know? And right now we're seeing it across the board. Like if you build it, they will come. The DoW over the last 2 weeks has made it very clear. Like we need munitions. We need people to build munitions here. And so I'm trying to do that as a not just a veteran-owned company, but an American-owned company. I think it's super important when it comes to the defense industrial base. We can't keep relying on BAE or Hanwha or whatever to come in and stand up manufacturing, because if they do that, then they own the process. They'll own the IP. Maybe not on the TDP side. Maybe we will. Maybe they will. I don't really know. But if they're controlling the entire manufacturing process, if they pull out at some point, then what? They pull out with all that knowledge. Like, and not only that, but we have enough great tech leaders and bright minds in this country to build out those processes. It's going to take time to build out the plants, anyways. So why are we in my own mind, it's like, why are we handing billions of dollars to foreign actors that have parent companies that have headquarters in China when you and I couldn't do business with China if we wanted to, if we're on the defense side. But like, how is a parent company to a defense company here have headquarters in China? To me, it's nonsense. If we're America first, if we're all these things, if we're the arsenal of freedom, then it shouldn't be leased. It should be built by Americans. So that's that's one of my major focuses.
Yeah. What is the biggest challenge right now with making munitions from your standpoint and scaling?
I would say the hard part is, we don't move fast enough as a country, right? When it comes to the current innovation and things. So like the conversations that I've had, um, it's about finding the right partners that understand like where things need to go. And so far, like big money, big DIB, big gov likes to see what they know, right? And so and when you start challenging the big primes, then they're not too happy about it. And I think that's the one big hard part is getting over, you're just trying to shove innovation down old throats. Like there's a blueprint to go out there on how to make money, and there's ways that things have always been done, and it's time for that to change. And the only way for you to do that is to like understand that part of it. And so like that's one of the first big hard part. The second big hard part is just raw material, right? Like we don't refine enough in this country based off of other, political action and other, kind of PC stuff that we try to stay away from. But ultimately, if we want to manufacture in this country, then we also have to refine in this country. So if we don't have the rare earth minerals being refined here, if we don't have the raw materials, then that's like the second big hard part. But our focus, is how do we get around that, and how do we do it all in house so that we're not having to also worry about the logistic headache of taking energetics from one spot and a shell from another spot and a fusing from another spot, and like have all those things coordinated with state lines, over state lines, shipping and everything else. If it all just comes to one spot, then we only have to worry about one location and one output. And because the manufacturing is agile, it can be other things that our clients need. It doesn't have to be just a 40 millimeter grenade. It could be drive lines for the new tanks that are coming out if they're falling short.
So where are you in your own personal journey and the war's journey of getting this? So you're already contracted to give out your TDPs to companies, right? You're building munitions.
Well, we have one partner company on the manufacturing side, and that's because we're kind of going down this path with them to develop new IP around new manufacturing. So we not only have the IP around the manufacturing, but we also have it around the TDPs. We have both sides of the house that are internal to us. And so our focus is over the next 60 days. So we did a big splash a couple weeks ago. We were the host of the NDIA Future Forces live fire event. And so for the first time, people got to see our 40 millimeter up to a 250-pound bomb on the floor. And then we went out and did some live fire testing of some of the different products that we have, whether it's some of the things that went boom were the drone ordnance and a couple other things. But our focus is within the next 60 days to have some static demo testing of some of our larger ordnance. And then within the next 90 to 120 days, having that stuff actually live fired out of howitzers and some of the other larger caliber stuff. So we'll kind of see how things go. There's a lot of funding talks around a lot of these things too. So that's kind of where things sit on those particular portions of the company. Obviously, we do light laser programs. We do a lot of other things, but that's kind of like our larger focus now because that's where the focus of the DoW is.
Yeah, and you're a pretty lean company, right? How many people you got?
We have about 10 people.
Yeah, and so is that, have you seen that challenge going up against, folks with, thousands of people?
As we grow, I mean, we're going to grow, as funding comes in, we're going to be doing a lot of hiring, hopefully over the next, towards the end, over the next few quarters as we build out the manufacturing, we'll end up hiring a lot of people. But I think it's been really nice so far. And I think that Project Oni, which you kind of briefly mentioned in the intro, Project Oni is our consortium. So we have a bunch of companies that fall underneath our banner that we rely on to help build out the whole system of systems, because we can build the piece of ordnance, but the DoW and the ARL, they don't want to buy that, right? They don't want to buy a widget. They don't want to buy a munition. They don't want to buy an armament. They don't want to buy a drone. They want to buy the ammo with the armament on the drone deployed from a larger vehicle. So our focus is building out all those things. So all the Project Oni teams help us do that. So we're not just building one piece out. We build out the whole system of systems, and that's all going to come together in one location. So
that's cool. Where are you guys going to be in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years? Give me your vision.
Yeah. So within the next 5 years, we will have a manufacturing site set up. We have a couple of different site selections that have already been made. We're trying to finalize some numbers on those. But within the next 5 years, we will have basically an entire defense industrial park, really, that you'll see, for the first time in a long time, an entire complex round come out of one location. So the energetics will be done there, the fusing is going to be done there, the shell is going to be done there, how it's put together will be done there. That munition integrated, sold with an armament onto a larger tactical vehicle will all be done, and the drones will be done in-house in one location.
So that's a pretty capital intensive project.
Massive. Massive, yeah. I bit off, a huge chunk, and I said, "No, this is what I'm gonna do." And so, like I said, it's been 3 years of building to this point, and it'll be another about a year and a half to, like, the next major step. I would say within the next by the end of the year, we should be to production at a smaller scale. We already have some small scale production that we can do now, mostly for testing, but our hope is that by the end of the year, we'll be having a small amount of production going out, so.
Great. How are you approaching the capital raise? Was it through partners, VC? Like, what's your
We have a couple VC talks that we're, like, in the middle of now. We have some larger, state government, and maybe some Fed government stuff that we're trying to, lean on as we kind of build out. And so what we will likely do is kinda go through our first raise, use that, raise to build out the manufacturing that we need, for initial batches, and then I think we'll be able to offset a large amount of the future capital with selling out the Tacoma machine and selling out those products. So we will do probably a second raise, but after that, I don't know if we do a third.
Okay. Great. Let's do a quick lightning round. Get your thoughts. We'll just 30 seconds, whatever. I probably won't comment, just a click through. So let's see what you got. So, what's the biggest myth or misconception about selling to the DoD?
That your product is needed. Like, I think that there's a lot of people that go out and build a product and they're like, "Oh, I can for sure sell this. Like, this is needed." But there's there's not a pathway for it, and it was never asked for. And so I think there's a lot of people, at least that I've met, that think that it's gonna be easy. That's like, they just believe so much in their product. They're like, "Oh, it's gonna be easy. Like, there's no way they're not gonna buy this." And it's like, that's not how it works. This just isn't how it works. There's a lot of due diligence and a lot of, back end pieces that I don't think a lot of people realize you gotta get through. There's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of hand holding, there's a lot of lobbying. Sometimes you gotta not just break the rules, but you gotta create new ones, right? You gotta, like, show people, like, "Hey, there's a whole new way of doing things," and that's kinda the same path I'm, struggling through, so.
Very cool. Hardest lesson you've learned so far building a defense company? Now your second.
Yeah, the hardest lesson I've learned is that there are snakes, and there are people, especially at the upper echelon, that have a stranglehold on certain sectors, and if you go to challenge that, they're gonna come after you, and that's globally. I've had other countries come to this country to visit sites and stuff that we were doing, and, immediately there was, like, extortion attempts, you know, and blackmail attempts.
Jeez. That's unfortunate.
And also the amount of theft that happens, I would say is another surprising thing. Like, you need to protect your IP. So make sure that if you want to get in the defense space, you better invest in cybersecurity, make sure that you're very, very careful about who you share what with. So
Interesting. What's the number one piece of advice you'd give to someone starting a defense tech company?
if you're not, I mean, whether you're a veteran or not, honestly, I would say that the biggest piece of advice that I could tell you is two things. One, invest, heavily in yourself and the knowledge base that you have. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're going to get in the defense space, you need to understand the gap that you're going to fill and understand what the future of that kind of niche looks like. And so you need to, at this point, what I would say is, like, you need to go to Ukraine. You need to go to a FWAT somewhere, go get embedded knowledge from what's actually necessary. Because I've seen it time and time again where you have someone who just doesn't understand the gap or doesn't understand the needs of the military, and they go out and they create something. I've got another company that I'm a partner called Black Star Syndicate, and so we have companies that sign up to come get advising from us, and they'll be like, "Hey, we have this really cool idea," and I'm like, "No one asked for that, and no one's gonna pick that up." Like, it doesn't, like, you've honestly, like, wasted a
You're
lot of.
just a dream killer.
I am a little bit of a dream killer, but I'm not a dream killer. It's more of like, if you build a really cool thing, cool. the next thing is like you need to have that resource, that information from people that are actually going to use it. So go talk to the actual end users, figure out what they need, and then learn how to punch from the bottom up and the top down. Right? You have to have those heroes, those champions for your stuff or your product, whatever it is, coming from the top down, coming from the Pentagon, coming from you know you know general officers. Right? You have to have both sides working on it because otherwise you'll never cross the valley of death if you don't have those two things. If you don't have a product that's actually needed and people fighting for you, you're just going to sit in the valley of death.
Right. Name a sacred cow in defense tech you think will be proven false. Something that everyone's hanging on, and it's going to be proven false.
I'm probably going to catch a lot of flack for this, but like deployable manufacturing, I just don't see it as a relative thing. There's been a lot of focus on that recently, but you go out to if you actually go out to Ukraine, spend some time with the guys that are at the front, like they don't have time to worry about, subjecting off some of their manpower to focus on like pushing buttons in a thing to 3D print drones. They just don't. And so if you have a deployable thing that's deployable manufacturing, the end users for that kind of stuff is not the US because we don't fight stuff here. We fight at other places. And so in most cases, we have a major fob and the amount of money it takes to buy some 3D printers or buy some other deployable kind of manufacturing, it doesn't have to come all sexy in a box. You could just get some of it and put it in a building you took over because that's where it'll actually be manufactured is way behind the flot. Like it's just not necessary. And so I think that it just doesn't really pencil. Like if you send over a container that has all the pre-built, things and they can deploy out, pre-built drones and they take off and then whatever, cool. But, the future battle spaces are going to be such contested logistic areas that, cool. Even if you got the manufacturing there, it's going to last one run because the odds of you getting more manufacturing material, the raw material to produce the thing out there, it's just not likely.
That's perfect. I guess real quick, just out of curiosity, so lightning round's over. How do you just as a civilian go over to Ukraine and in bed with them? You just get an airplane and go?
Yeah, man, you get to Poland and then you get in through one of the channels from Poland into Ukraine and then you go out there and you start linking up with people and talking and they're like, "Hey man, I want to help."
Damn. Very interesting. Well, good. Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for. But before we wrap, now that we got through all of our IT issues, what if they want to people want to follow you, check out War? How best do they do that?
You can honestly just go to our website. That's probably one of these ways to find out we have a lot of stuff that we do on there, not all of it, because we have a lot of other overseas initiatives and stuff and other places. But if you just war.inc, not .com, just war.inc. We're really proud of that. We beat the DOW by a couple of years. And so we've been able to piggyback a little bit off their SEO. But yeah, so war.inc is probably the easiest way to find us.
Okay. Well, amazing. Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Great conversation. Learned a lot. And I wish you guys the best of luck, and we'll see you around.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.